So this is the Whole Man Academy podcast. I am your host, Anthony Asprey. My guest today is the lovely Steve Bland.
Hi.
Steve is a journalist and podcast presenter. He occasionally hosts the award-winning podcast YouMeandtheBigC. He's also an occasional marathon runner. And today we're going to talk about being a dad, dealing with grief, the power of podcasts, running a marathon, and barbecues, which I think is obviously something important to us chaps with the summer kind of just
Full-time host of YouMeandtheBigC.
Full-time host.
Full-time host.
Good. We're going to come on to that as well about how that's been affected with lockdown. So, Steve, welcome to the Whole Man Academy.
Thanks for having me.
First question we always start with is, how are you and where are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm at home in Knutsford in Cheshire, a very leafy little bit of Cheshire, which it's a town that I grew up in. Well, I moved here when I was 4 and pretty much lived here ever since. 36 years on and off.
That's a good effort. And how are you feeling at the moment? Because we're kind of just coming out of lockdown, but we feel like we've been in it for, 10 weeks or something.
I don't have a clue. Is it 9 weeks, 10 weeks? Is it Monday? Is it Friday?
Yeah. It's all started to roll into one.
I'm good. We, my son and I have a 4-year-old son called Freddie. And, so it's just been the two of us. We've been doing all right. It's been fairly intense with just two of us. The weather's been an absolute godsend, hasn't it? Letting him play outside and I can't imagine, how tough it would have been if it'd been bad weather the whole time, would have been just an absolute nightmare. But so that's been a bit of a godsend. And we've been doing okay. I think, we'll get on to everything else, later. But the last, 3 or 4 years have sort of instilled in me a fair bit of resilience and I think an ability to only try and focus on the things that I can actually affect. And this isn't, I can't do anything about this, so we have to just get on with it and make the best of the situation.
No, it's an important point, and I know you hit on something there about the weather when obviously we were introduced by our friend Robin Swithenbank, and I think he said to me the weather has sugar-coated a bad situation.
Yeah,
because you have been able to get outside.
It's totally made about. It's totally. Taking it from a complete nightmare to just being, bearable.
Yeah.
I know. I'm lucky. I've got garden space. I know not everybody is, the same. And we do feel really lucky to be able to, go in the garden. We've got woods just around the corner, and so we've been outside quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just given me a bit of a break from Freddie as well, and him a break from me. Like I said, it's quite intense with just a 4-year-old, and I think if we were just cooped up inside the whole time, it would be fairly tedious for us both.
I think we've spoken to a lot of guys through the Whole Man Academy in the last 10 weeks, either via Zoom calls that we've been doing or on podcasts, or just guys that we've connected with, and we often said that for some of the dads who've got kids, they're not, and the mums as well, but they're not getting a break from the kids, and the kids aren't getting a break from them. And in fact, some of the guys we knew that live on their own, they were saying that actually they've kind of been in solitude for 10 weeks. So it was a bit like we could all do with a bit of what the other one have had. It was just a little bit of, the guys that live on their own could do with a bit of a hug, and the dads perhaps could do with just a day or two where you have, all your own time.
I'm definitely grateful that he's, Freddie's been around. He's 4, nearly 5, so he's starting to develop, quite a personality, and he's actually really good company now. He's, you can actually have, fairly intelligent conversations with him. He'll watch things that aren't completely tedious on the TV, and that's kind of made a difference. I think if it had been a couple of years ago, if this would have happened, it would have been certainly different with a 2-year-old. But he's been brilliant. I thought he'd struggle quite a lot being, quite a sociable kid, and he's used to playing with his mates on the street, and my sister lives around the corner with her, her children, and Freddie sees them almost every day normally, and so I thought that he'd struggle, but he's been great. He's been just fantastic, great company, and that's not to say we haven't had our little couple of couple of moments or we've butted heads over a mixture of things. But it's been all right.
Well, it's good to hear, and I think we'll get on to other topics, but even going on to this, a lot of the guys you spoke to have said it's good to hear other dads saying, and and mums, dads, or anybody that's looking after kids saying, it isn't easy, and sometimes you have flare-ups, and each day has brought its own challenges at the moment. Especially now with I guess for some people are trying to, when kids are going back to school or nursery and they're not, they haven't been there for a while. It's an interesting time for us all.
It's difficult, but I mean, I think there's there's a bit of pressure put on parents by some. Some people on social media, if you were to believe their social media, they're going to come out of this speaking 8 languages and having written 5 novels, while juggling 8 children and a job. I just think this is just such an exceptional time that almost just making it through to the next day is a success. And once we get out of it, we'll all kind of figure out where we are. But I just think don't put too much pressure on yourself.
Yeah, well, I know. I'm trying to think which podcast I heard where the guy said, just do what you can at the moment, and hopefully the kids are, as you say, just like us, resilient, and hopefully we'll forget about it fairly quickly.
That's it. Yeah.
And in fact, we're talking about resilience, and you've already mentioned it. That's one of the big things about the Whole Man Academy is helping men deal with basically anything that gets thrown at them. As we know, things are going to get thrown at us left, right, and centre, and be able to be resilient in those times. And one of the things that you and I have spoken about off camera or via email before this was covering subjects that aren't often talked about, but of course, touch a lot of us. So I know, getting into it, you were married to Rachael, and was it back in 2013?
Yeah, good.
And I guess for you, telling the story of the fact that obviously Rachael, had breast cancer, and for me, and I'll say this honestly, I watched a video when I was just kind of getting a bit more information about yourself, where Rachael spoke about, the difficulty of leaving you, but especially with Freddie. And I sat there and cried, because being a dad who has got little kids, I can't understand what it's like, but I could try and imagine, and honestly, it made me cry, because it was such a touching story. And I mean, perhaps for yourself, you could tell the guys listening kind of your take on what happened with the timings and how you dealt with Rachael and what happened.
Yeah, so going back to the start, Rachael was a BBC news reader. She read the news on BBC 5 Live, occasionally on the news channel as well. If you live up in the northwest, she was on local telly up here as well quite a bit. And she was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2016, in November 2016, and after best part of 2 years of things not working, and I was going to say ups and downs. There weren't too many ups. It was mostly downs, and then a bit of level, and then a bit further down. And she died in September 2018. So coming on 2 years ago, and so I've had 2 years of trying to kind of work out what to do next, work out how to be a dad by myself, and it's it's not been easy, but we're still here, we're still standing,
still fighting.
Exactly, and still trying to do whatever I can to carry on a lot of the work that she started.
And I know, I mean, again, when I was reading about your situation, one of the big things was obviously with Freddie, with Rachael kind of trying to leave behind, videos and things, so that as he's growing up, he can have an understanding of what his mum was like. But as a dad, how's it been for you? Because I guess obviously the obvious thing is to look at how it's been for Freddie, but for you, from the moment that you first kind of heard the news, how have you managed to kind of stay? I'm not saying always staying strong, because I'm pretty sure there's been dark times, but how with your journey, have you managed to compartmentalize it and deal with getting on with your life?
Do you mean since she died, or do you mean since you were diagnosed?
Since she was diagnosed.
Yeah. So since she was diagnosed, it's a funny thing. I've always been quite practical. And you know, I think when she was diagnosed, you know, first of all, we didn't think it would end the way it did. You know, breast cancer is meant to be one of the ones that, you know, you can treat and you can get past.
Yeah.
So that, you know, my whole focus was on her, in making her believe that. And it's a funny thing. You don't really have a lot of time to think about yourself, and I know you should. I know, you know, certain people said to me, you know, right from the start, you know, make sure you look after yourself. You know, and during the 2 years that she was ill, you know, how are you doing? And I'd say, all right. You know, how are you really doing? I say, honestly, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Because you just develop this resilience, and you know, my whole focus was on her, and the problem was that if I showed her that I was, you know, struggling or having problems, you know, that's just one more thing for her to worry about, and that's the last thing that I want, you know, is to give her more to worry about. And Rachel was quite a worrier, you know, and I knew that if she, you know, that if she thought that I was having a bad time, you know, more than, you know, the bad time that she would imagine that I was having anyway, because my wife had breast cancer. If she thought that I was really struggling, you know, that would just break her.
Yeah.
It'd be so difficult for her to handle. So my entire focus was just on her, you know, probably at the expense of, you know, my own health. A friend of mine said to me a few weeks ago, I can't think what we're talking about, but he said, I can remember talking to you when, during the time Rachel was ill, and he said that I just looked white, and I looked a bit overweight, and I just looked like so unhealthy, you know, so stressed, and I think it never even crossed my mind that I was, you know, having a tough time. Particularly, you just focus on Rachel, and that's the thing. While I was having a tough time, she was having a far worse time, because she was having to, you know, fully look, you know, the end of her life.
Yeah.
In the eye, and particularly the last year, or the last sort of 7 months or so, 6 months after we found out that she was, you know, she wasn't going to get better, that it was incurable, you know, just, I can't imagine what she was going through. You know, it must have been, you know, horrendous. Like, we talk quite openly, but still, I mean, I can't imagine it, how that would feel. So yeah, so I guess my focus was, you know, just on her. I think I've said to you before that I really try and focus on just what I can, you know, what I can have an effect on, and the only stuff that I could have an effect on was being there for her and supporting her.
Yeah.
And it was only after she died, and I can remember sitting on my sofa, and maybe a day or two later, it was perhaps more than a day or two. The week or two after she died was mental. The level of press coverage and attention that she got was just extraordinary. And it was probably a couple of weeks after, and I was on my sofa, I took a big deep breath, and I can remember just bursting into tears. Not entirely just because I was upset, which I was, but, you know, just the exhaustion. And you just think, oh,
like the build up.
That was hard. That was hard, and you know, I'd do it all over again, given half the chance. But it was hard. It was hard. It was exhausting, and it was tiring. You know.
Who did you have to kind of speak to as a? And it hasn't got to be a male, but I saw on your Instagram you made a really good point. I mean, about what's been happening at the moment. That it's been hard, kind of missing friends and not seeing them for birthdays and events and what have you. But going through that, did you kind of have one male friend that you kind of spoke to more, or are you have more like a collective group of mates?
I have probably 3 or 4 that I consider to be really, really, really close male friends. One, a guy who lives in Dorset, you know, so a fair way away, and 2 others who live around the corner in Knutsford.
Right.
And but it's hard for them as well, and you know, they've not been in this situation. They don't know what to do. And I think a lot of the you know, the work that I've tried to do since Rachel died has been trying to make people okay with talking about these difficult things, because I mean, you ask anybody that's been in my situation or in Rachel's situation, there are friends that just vanish. They properly vanish, and it's not because they're bad people. It's just because they have no idea what to do. They have no idea what to say. They have no idea how to help. And then you get some other people who are maybe a bit more, maybe they've been through something themselves, and they've just got more of an idea of what they might want. I had friends who weren't, I wouldn't have even considered them to be really close friends, but they were just fantastic. They were just there for me. One guy, an old BBC colleague, he was a good mate, but he was just there all the time, for a chat, just the odd text.
Yeah.
How you doing? And I think it's, a lot of the stuff that I've tried to say is, people have said, like, what's the worst thing that you can say? The worst thing is absolutely nothing. I'd far rather someone, tried to say something, tried to do the right thing, and made a pig's ear of it and said nothing.
I guess I know I spoke to a chap on a podcast the other night who'd lost his daughter to complications with the flu, and she was just 13, and he spoke, about that, of having the support of the people around you, and as you said, some people just don't know how to react and don't know what to say. And I know, I guess, going even back with the Whole Man Academy, what the initiative is about is, the more that you encourage people to talk about these things, the more it normalizes it, and perhaps people, even if they don't know exactly what to say, they at least start that conversation.
Yeah, and it's so true. It was the whole, we'll come on to it at some point soon, but that was the whole point of why Rachel started her podcast, because there were these conversations have been had on social media in this little echo chamber of young women with cancer. Well, some guys too, mostly women with cancer, and it just wasn't being replicated. It wasn't a conversation that anybody else was having or wanted to engage with. And she wanted to bring that conversation out and show that these things are okay to talk about. And so that's been a big thing for me to to wherever I can, anytime I do an interview or talk on a podcast or whatever it might be, because I know some guys are terrible at talking about stuff. We all know guys like that, and so I think it's a responsibility of those of us that are more able to talk about it to talk about it and talk about these difficult things. And for me, talking about Rachel and has never felt like a chore or something that I shouldn't be doing. It's always felt like a massive honor. Not something I'm ashamed of. I'm massively proud of what she achieved.
Yeah.
And I'll happily tell anybody about her and about everything.
And that's the important thing, isn't it? It's even like tonight, I appreciate you giving me your time to come and speak, but we always hope that it doesn't matter if it's a guy listening, but because we know that 25% of our listeners are female actually on our podcast, which is interesting. It's the Whole Man Academy, and what that shows you is that women are interested in what we're thinking, which is funny because often we don't know what we're thinking anyway. But we always say, like, if one guy listens to our podcast and takes away a golden nugget, and whilst we talk about this, everybody's going to be affected by grief at some point. Unfortunately, it's not something generally that you're going to avoid. And going on from that, as you said about starting the podcast for Rachel, what did the podcast give you when she started it? Because it's an award-winning podcast. It was huge, and I remember at the time kind of hearing it and listening to one of the episodes and thinking, it sounds silly, but what a great idea. My parents both had some form of cancer themselves, so I didn't know much about it, I'll admit, until one of them phoned me up and said, I've got cancer, and suddenly I was very interested in the whys and wherefores of it.
Yeah.
But with yourself, kind of, if you tell us a bit about the story of the podcast, because it's been massive, hasn't it?
Yeah. So Rachel was, as I said earlier on, she was a BBC journalist, and when she was diagnosed, I can remember sitting on a sofa and she was talking about kind of what she should do, how she should be, talking about it, because she wanted to talk about it, whether it be on social media or whatever. But she wanted to be open about it, what was happening, if only to point people somewhere rather than have to answer question after question after question after question. And so she started blogging, and it was probably about best part of over a year after she was diagnosed, that she, we had the idea for the podcast. And I was a producer at the BBC, she was a presenter, so I had a kind of production hat on, and was able to kind of try and talk her through how it might work and who she might want to have on it.
Yeah.
And she was part of this Instagram sort of cancer community, mostly young women, like I said, who were talking very openly. And she wanted to bring that conversation to the more mainstream. And so she picked a couple of girls, Deborah James and Lauren Mann, who Deborah's got stage 4 bowel cancer. Lauren is, she was diagnosed similar time to Rachel, but she's now a year, possibly 2 years actually, clear.
Yeah.
And Rachel pitched it to the guys at 5 Live, the bosses at 5 Live, and I think initially they weren't over the moon because, like you say, it hadn't been done before. It's not an obvious, the BBC don't. I don't think they want to be the people that make these little niche podcasts. They want ones that go far and wide and hit big numbers. And they weren't totally convinced, I don't think, and they also weren't convinced with that Rachel would be okay to do it. Her health was up and down, and so anyway, they gave the go ahead. The girls met for the first time at the first recording, and just hit it off straight away. And straight away you could tell, for the cancer community, particularly, like I said, for guys, we're not all good at talking about it. The same thing for girls. There was a cancer community on Instagram, but then beyond that, there were loads and loads of other people that weren't on Instagram that wanted an outlet. They wanted something, what the podcast gave them was just, this feeling of not being in the trenches alone. Somebody was there with them going through the same thing, and these beautiful young women who were living their lives to the fullest, while going through cancer treatment. Gave everyone such encouragement, and it just became such a hit. And I know for Rachel, the response was just massive for her. It just gave us such a lift. And for me, it was fantastic, because it was, I could see in her the lift it gave her, and that that takes a bit of the pressure off. It just just gave her so much confidence. It was just incredible. But I'll tell you the truth, I didn't really play an awful lot of part in it, until when would it have been? Probably about, I don't know, maybe this time last year, actually, this time 2 years ago, when the girls did a podcast on friends and family, and sort of how cancer impacts on the nearest and dearest. And I did it. They sort of handed it over to me, to Lauren's brother, to Deborah's dad, and also Jonathan Agnew from the BBC, cricket man at the BBC. Anybody that knows Aggers is a big guy. He's 6'5", 6'6", and his wife Emma had breast cancer, and one of the first things that he said to me was that he had been to the doctor, the GP, straight away when Emma got diagnosed, because he was worried about his mental health. I'm thinking, flipping it, this proper alpha male, former international cricketer, if he can go and talk about it, pretty much anybody can, I think.
Isn't that important? Just say, sometimes we always say at our events, it's not necessarily always about having high profile people, famous people there, but it helps for a lot of guys to see someone who isn't shy about saying, I've faced this challenge in my life. And we've had a lot of guys that say, wow, rightly or wrongly, people put someone on a pedestal, and they're either big in sport or in whatever field they're in. but having someone up there just saying, a great example was Robin Windsor, who was on our one of our podcasts, and it's a great interview and a lot of fun. But I mean, it was the point where I think maybe 40 minutes in, where he kind of spoke about the fact that he'd contemplated taking his own life and got very close to it. And we had a couple of messages afterwards from people just saying, wow, it's brave to talk about it on camera, because it's it's the most personal thing you can talk about. But of course, any of the challenges that guys are going through in life just means that, if someone can hear you talking about it, and as you say with him as well, and you're like, wow, there's a big guy, larger than life chap here, who's quite happy to be show some vulnerability.
Yeah, and that's what it is, isn't it? And it almost shouldn't be seen as vulnerability, should it? It should just be entirely
the way
normal.
You are. Yeah.
It should just be, there shouldn't be a problem with, or it shouldn't be seen as being brave. It shouldn't be seen as being anything special. And I can remember thinking with Aggers, I remember thinking how amazing it was that he would talk about it so openly. It's quite high profile, and and that was the first time he actually talked about it. And he actually said, I think he said something. I mean, he actually found it really, really useful talking with the five of us, because he hadn't really talked about it. Emma was diagnosed, I think, quite a few months before, perhaps even a year before, and he'd never talked about it to anybody other than her. None of his close friends, and he found it really useful just to be able to sit in that studio and just have a conversation with people that understood. That was the thing with the podcast. People were listening, and the people talking on the podcast, had been there. They were there at the time. They were in the trenches. They were doing it, and they were living their lives to the fullest while they were going through their treatment. And I think to so many people, it just resonated, and it became a big hit. I mean, it's never had the sort of numbers of. I mean, some of the massive podcasts, that Peter Crouch podcast, the biggest BBC podcast ever, and it doesn't have the numbers of that. But I think it's got a much more engaged audience where they tune in on a Wednesday. Yeah, just they tune in on a Wednesday or a Monday, whatever it's been, and they need it. They really need that podcast. And
I always think as you're saying that, talking openly, especially in a group, it becomes for want of better words, a light-hearted version of therapy. So, to be able to talk with people that are going to understand what you've gone through. But I mean, the great obvious part of it is recording it and letting, unlimited amount of people listen to it as well. Is priceless.
It's sort of been my therapy. I know. To jump on a bit, after Rachel died, I did a podcast with the girls, and because I knew I used to work in PR and in the media, and I knew with my sort of PR hat on, I knew that people were interested in what I had to say about Rachel. I was getting interview requests, but I wanted the podcast to get the benefit of that. So the first time that I spoke, I wanted it to be on the podcast. So I talked to the girls, and it sort of went pretty well, and they were still kind of trying to work out what to do, whether they'd carry on with the two of them, or how that might work, because Rachel was very much the anchor of the podcast, being the sort of full-time presenter. She knew how to kind of control the conversation a bit more. And the controller of 5 Live came up to me afterwards a couple of weeks later, and he said, that was really good. Do you fancy doing it? And I'd been thinking that I really did. But I never wanted it to be, to kind of impose that on them. It was their thing.
Yeah.
It was their podcast. It wasn't mine. And I didn't want to impose that. But then when he said that, I was like, yeah, absolutely would love to. And that became my therapy, to go back to the therapy point. That became my therapy. So I tried I tried 3 sessions, actually, I can't say, after Rachel died, just because I didn't want to be, so arrogant to think that I didn't need it.
Yeah.
But I didn't really feel like it was doing anything for me, and I think the reality is that I talk so openly about her anyway, to anybody that will listen. Particularly at that time, I was doing there was a lot of interest in her. So I was doing interviews and talking on the podcast, and that became my therapy. That became a place where I talked about her and talked about what I was feeling and what was happening. And
Yeah.
I just didn't really. I mean, it's not possibly something I go back to in the future if I felt I would need it, but I didn't feel like it was a thing for me at the time.
Has it? I mean, with the situation we've all been in at the moment, has it taken a 10-week break? The podcast. So I assume it will be back, bigger and better.
Yeah. So it's more of a. We actually started recording the next series about 2 weeks before lockdown, maybe 3 weeks, and we recorded one episode, and then lockdown happened. And actually, even before lockdown happened, when it started to affect kind of transport and it started to affect how mobile people were, a lot of our guests are cancer patients, our presenters are cancer patients, and a lot of them are on treatment, so their immune system is not what it should be.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to be dragging people to studios and making them do things that they shouldn't be doing. So we sort of paused it, and we've actually had a. I think as the story's gone on, cancer patients have become kind of one of the focus of the whole lockdown period, because of the impact it's having on people getting diagnosed the first time. People aren't going to see GPs. Some GPs are 85% down in their numbers of people coming to see them with early or potential cancer symptoms, and it's going to have terrifying consequences in a few months' time. And so we've wanted to restart. It's just been a couple of logistical issues with timings and various other things, but we are starting to record again next week.
Good, glad to hear it.
Yeah,
I think it's one of those that it's so difficult, isn't it, as you say, because you want to bring people in, but especially if it's someone with a low immune system at the moment, then they're at increased risk. And how about for yourself with Freddie? How have you stayed as a dad? How did you deal best with the situation? Is it just taking one day at a time with him?
It was difficult. I think that was inevitably my biggest focus after Rachel died. Obviously, her job as a mum was the thing she was most proud of, and it was the thing we talked about most, was making sure that he was going to be okay. She gave me some very very strict instructions about how to keep his hair, the kind of clothes he should be wearing, or all that kind of stuff. Sort of from day one, that was my biggest focus, and well, even before she died, really, working out how to tackle that that event for him, and I think my initial thoughts were to couch it, fluff it up in so Mummy's gone to live with the stars, or I go to live in the stars, or gone to live with Jesus, or something that didn't sound so brutal as Mummy's died and she's not going to come back. But then talking to some charities and things, that's what you have to say. You have to be honest.
Where do you even start with that?
Well, I mean, Rachel died at home, so she died in our bedroom, and Freddie had known that she'd been ill, and he was about a week shy of his third birthday. So he's quite able. I mean, he doesn't understand, but he was. He's of an age where he kind of sort of grasps, what's going on.
Yeah.
So she died in the middle of the night, about 3:15 in the morning, and he knew that she'd been ill. He knew that she'd been in bed. So the next morning, I took him up to our room at about 9 o'clock, I think, in the morning, and I just showed him the empty bed, and I just said, "Look, Mummy, you know that she was ill. You know that she was extremely poorly, and unfortunately she died, and she's not going to come back. And he burst into tears on me, gave me a big cuddle, and then got up and ran off and played with his toys. Kids are incredible. They have just that's what I found with this lockdown period. They have an ability just to accept things, to not need to understand it too much.
Yeah.
I think we possibly overthink it. And he was fine. And I mean, I'm starting to find now, he's, like I say, he's nearly 5, and I think now he's definitely starting to ask a lot more questions. He's a little tyke, actually. He uses Rachel as a bit of an excuse for being naughty sometimes. He'll be a bit doing something he shouldn't be doing, and I'll tell him off, and he'll get all upset, and then he says, "Oh, but Daddy, I just really miss Mummy so much." I said, "No way, you're not having that, no chance."
Yeah, you can have it a bit, but
yeah, don't overplay your cards, son. Sorry, my earphones are falling out, but
all right.
Yeah, so it's been my biggest focus, though, definitely him, and pretty much every decision I've made since has been with him in mind, and
yeah. And how's it affected you with your work, obviously, because obviously having to look after him and trying to work as well. I mean, I know several parents who are single parents, and of course it brings up so many challenges around the work and home life.
So before Rachel died, I worked in PR for about just over 2 years, and before that I was at the BBC. But so the job I was in, PR, Rachel died in September. I was thinking, I could go back to that, but the reality was that I had an opportunity to take a bit of time off. Financially we were okay with insurances and what have you, and a bit of time, had a chance to have a bit of time off, and I kind of knew that wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. I sort of knew that, especially once I started doing the podcast, I knew that had become a big focus. So work has been quite a fluid concept for the last 18 months. I definitely feel now like I need to be doing something a bit more to get some focus, particularly the last sort of 9 or 10 weeks have taught me that I'm just, the podcast is brilliant, and I do another few bits and bobs at the BBC. I work on another podcast called Hooked, all about addiction, which was the winner of, after Rachel died, the 5 Live launched a thing called the Rachael Bland New Podcast Award.
Yes.
And the idea was to give the same chance that 5 Live had given Rachel to another person or people who wanted to kind of give a voice to another community. And the first winners were 2 girls who'd been in a addiction centre, and been through all manner of terrifying and terrible experiences. But it's a fantastic podcast. So I work on that as well, just production. And so other bits and bobs, but nothing kind of really concrete. And I think I've never really been someone that's enjoyed working, but I definitely am missing the structure and the normality of having a focus like that.
I think that's such an important topic for guys listening, and it doesn't really matter what the situation is that's created that kind of vacuum of work. And I know we've spoken to guys in different situations, and even if you just took redundancy and then you take some time out, but very quickly you sometimes can feel, and I've had it myself, you feel like you lack a bit of purpose.
Yeah.
Because everybody else is doing what they're doing, and you're kind of I found myself pottering around at home, and there's only so much pottering you can do.
Yeah, I mean, once you've done the garden, and once you've tidied the garage out, you know, there's only so many things you can do. And yeah, I definitely have missed that focus and that purpose. That, you know, I think even though it's not really a job, the podcast gives me that, because I know how important it is, you know, both in terms of the listeners, but also for Rachel's legacy as well. Carrying on something that she was so passionate about is really important to me. And you know, that podcast is a really big part of you know, sort of my my purpose and my focus. It's a big deal for me.
I think I know we're trying to cover many topics with the Whole Man Academy, but you know, a man's purpose, I think, is right up there, because you know, if you've got that down, you know, everything else can kind of fall into place.
Yeah, definitely.
And talking of purpose with podcasts, I mean, you know, we're recording one here, but I mean, podcasts have exploded in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I just wonder your thoughts on, like, what podcasts do you listen to and why?
I got really into real crime ones, and then when there were too many of those, I got fairly bored. I tend to listen to podcasts who are done by mates, you know, guys at Five Live who did a good friend of mine called Chris Warburton did a podcast called Beyond Reasonable Doubt.
Right.
And then he's done one called End of Days, which was fantastic. And then I'm good pals with a couple of the guys who do the Peter Crouch podcast, so I listen to that one quite religiously as well. And I like the escapism of podcasts. I like to have I listen to podcasts when I'm running or out.
Yeah.
You know, rather than music, I like to have podcasting because it engages me a bit. I don't really enjoy running, as we'll come on to a bit later.
Yeah.
And so I like to have something to take my mind off it a little bit. You take my mind off the fact that I'm running. And you know, a podcast is perfect. And you know, I like a nice long one. I don't like, you know, some 20-minute ones. They're not into that. I like, even if you have to put it down and pick it up again, I like a nice long podcast.
Isn't it that thing now of the, you know, of the long form conversation, which perhaps was kind of, I say dead, but you know, now you're able to find people that you're interested in listening to and go down lots of different avenues or rabbit holes instead of kind of do a quick 20-minute in and out. And
I think so.
Like Joe Rogan's the prime example of that, you know, with his huge podcast.
Yeah.
But that's for us been something to kind of trial. I think our longest podcast was just over 2 hours.
Wow. Yeah, we've not hit 2 hours. We did one where we were shown round. No, I'll tell you what it was. We did one where in the same podcast, we interviewed Andrew Strauss, whose wife died of cancer as well, and Lorraine Kelly, who's sort of big fan of the podcast and one of her producers on the Lorraine show. Helen, she's had breast cancer, and they launched a big campaign called Change and Check, which is you know, doing great work to help women get diagnosed, and so that was about an hour and a half, that podcast. It was a little on the long side, particularly. I think the trouble is with long podcasts is that if you want to attract a new listener, it's quite a big commitment to ask them to listen to an hour and a half of something they don't have any idea what it's about or who the people are. It's quite a lot to ask a new listener, I think. So I think we're gonna probably aim for under an hour for these new ones. It's it's as long as it's good for, I think. A podcast.
No, certainly. I think we're trialing different things, but I always say that podcasts saved my life because I hadn't listened to podcasts at all. But I was working in the city and was mildly unfulfilled, and my partner said, "You should listen to this podcast." And I've said before, I was like, I'm busy. I haven't got time to listen to that. And very, very quickly, I was, my commute wasn't long enough because you'd arrive at Charing Cross or Cannon Street, and you'd be like, I need another 10, 15 minutes. So I think for us, it's been great also to expand your network, but also to expand the reach. I mean, going back to the YouMeandtheBigC, as much as the Whole Man Academy, what we saw, of course, was our events were limited to just the guys that could come along to it. But now when you see the amount of people from different countries that have listened to our podcast, I think it's 20 plus countries.
Yeah.
And it's just great to realize that's the power of it. Firstly,
It's amazing. It's incredible. I mean, after Rachel died, I was getting messages from people in America, Brazil, Germany, all over Europe, saying they listened to the podcast and they were, how devastated they were. It was just absolutely extraordinary, like the reach of it. And before she died, it had reached number 1 in the podcast charts, and since she died, it's won all kinds of awards. I don't know. I wasn't here deliberately because these are behind me. So this was a television and radio industry council, Trick, best podcast, and then various other ones over there.
It tells you something when we say there are a lot of podcasts around now. So to win a award is it's no.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. That Trick one, actually, we were there were 3 of us in the shortlist. There was us, that Peter Crouch podcast, and another one, and so that was nice to win that one.
So does that mean if you've listened to the Peter Crouch podcast, that means you're into football?
Yes, I am.
If so, then what's your thoughts on kind of the season restarting at the moment? Because I know my mates and I are just like so desperate, forgetting what's going on. We're just desperate for some football.
Yeah, but I don't think you should be ashamed of talking about it. It's there's some people that would. I mean, as soon as you open your mouth saying you want football to come back, they say, "Well, it's not as important as people dying." Well, obviously, it's not. But you don't get the same reaction if you say, "Oh, I really miss going to the cinema," or "I really miss going to the pub." But for some reason, football gets this reaction. I just think it can't come back quick enough. And I know it's not going to be ideal behind, with no fans behind closed doors, but it's better than nothing.
I totally agree. You just said that. Was it 3 days ago? Someone said the same. I'll just give me any football at the moment. Something. And
I've watched Bayern Munich, Borussia Dortmnt tonight. It's absolutely brilliant.
Just going to say, at least there's something out there.
Yeah.
We all said, going back to guys getting together and talking, that not just football, but football, for example, is such a big part of many guys across the world, their life, and you're either playing it at the weekends and watching it, or you're just watching it, or even going to it, and it's part of the community with you guys getting together. I know, letting off steam, having a few drinks, and it's your day out, and that's been lost for everybody at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's a really good point. You shouldn't be shy in saying you're desperate to get football back on.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely desperate for it to come back, and I'm a Liverpool supporter, so I would be.
Me too. Yeah.
I can't let the season go. It's too important. I'm not. Yeah. That's not happening.
Yeah, I'm sure. Sir Alex is the only one that's sitting smiling at the moment.
Well, it's only like the teams who are on the verge of getting relegated that want it to be voided. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that. But say, being a Liverpool supporter myself, you just couldn't make it up that two games before the end.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how old you are, but I'm nearly 40. So, I went to watch my first game in the last year we won the league.
Yeah.
And to not really have seen it, to not have seen a winning a league winning team in the preceding. Well, in the next 31 years is just, it's just incredible. So, yeah.
Well, you'll be pleased to know I'm older than you. I'm 42 in a couple of weeks' time.
Right. Wow.
So I'm in the same boat here. I'm ready to celebrate. Here's the scary thing is that you win the league and you're not allowed to have you're not allowed to get 1 million people to get together to celebrate. So, I live around the corner from Jordan Henderson here, so I'll just go and hang out outside his house and just lob stuff at his window till he comes out, and we can have a big hug. Yeah, that sounds. Something. I'll pop up as well.
Yeah,
we'll have a barbecue. We're talking about that. I know we were going to get on to talk about fitness and sport, but talk about running. And tell me about I know you said you're an occasional marathon runner. So how did you get into that, and what you like as a runner?
I've always been a sportsman. I've always played football, cricket, tennis. I was a windsurfing instructor for a few years. Just any sport growing up, I would play. And but running, it's never really been a thing. And then I can remember being in London in 2005, and some mates were doing the marathon, and I was in London when around the finish line, watching it all happen. And these guys were coming out off the finish line. They were wrapped in their silver blankets. They had these medals around their necks, and they looked exhausted, but they looked so happy. And I just thought to myself, I really like to feel that. So the next year I did it for ASMA UK in 06. Didn't particularly enjoy it. It's just a really long way. I don't know if you've done them. It's a terribly long way. And then got together with Rachel, and then we did one. This time there's a different kind of reason. My sister and husband, their little boy died when he was only 5 days old. A complication was during labour, and so we ran. My brother-in-law and I ran for what charity was it? It was one of the kids charities. I can't think which one it was. That meant a great deal, and Rachel was running that one as well for a different charity. And then the year before last, Rachel had a place via Macmillan's celebrity team, and she managed to get me a place as well. But then her health wasn't good enough. She wasn't well enough to do it in 2018. So we kicked the place on to 2019, hoping that she'd be okay to do it then. Obviously, she died in September 2018. So not long after, Macmillan came to me and they said, do you fancy it? I was like, well, not really. They said, well, we'll give you, we can sort you out with a number of places, and what would be cool is if we formed like a team, Rachel, and made a big deal of it, because at the time, hope it doesn't sound like I'm having a go at Macmillan, but at the time Rachel's death was getting a lot of attention, and for them that's a good thing, because they can raise a lot of money off the back of that. And so we formed a little team. There were 6 of us, and managed to raise over 20,000. It was the power of TV. We were on something like 15,000, and then about a day before the marathon, I did an interview on something on radio or TV or something, and it literally went to 18,000 overnight.
Brilliant.
And then I was on BBC Breakfast the morning of the marathon from the start line, and it went from 18 to 21 in about 10 minutes. One guy donated £1,000, just a random person, and that was really amazing, because that was a little team of us that it was my best friend Will, the husband of one of Rachel's best friends, another one of Rachel's best friends, and then my brother-in-law and a mutual friend of ours called Henry. So there were 6 of us, and it was a really emotional day. We did a podcast from the marathon, actually.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, the girls met me on the finish line, and it was a really emotional day, but it meant a great deal, and I vowed I would never do another one again, and then I am apparently doing another one again.
I was going to say, so would you be interested in doing them around the world, or happy to stick with London?
I don't know. I don't really want to do any.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. I just no. Yeah. So last year was Macmillan. This year it's Cancer Research UK. Well, I mean, if it actually happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. Would you start looking at your times as well, or are you just happy to finish it?
Oh no, I was looking at times when I was doing it when I was 26,
Yeah.
not when I'm 40. That is just not important anymore.
Yeah.
I really wanted to. I'm like six. I'm not quite as tall as Robin, but I'm 6'3". Not really built for marathon running, and every marathon so far, all three of them, I've been cruising my way to under 4 hours, like 3:45, until near enough exactly the same point, about 19-ish miles, and then my calves have packed up, literally every single one. So I'm just not fussed about marathons, about times anymore. It's it's more just more for me having a focus.
Yeah.
And especially last year after Rachel died, it was amazing to have that focus of I wasn't working. I was working a bit with Rachel. Wrote a book before she died, which was released in the January after she died.
Yeah.
There was a lot of work to do about that, but the marathon gave me a really, really, really great focus at a time when I really needed it. And timings.
I guess it gives you something to train for, and as you said, something to focus on.
Yeah.
Did you, at the time, make amendments to your nutrition, everything as well, or did you just carry on with the running?
I should have,
because I know you're a meat eater and a meat lover.
I just don't really enjoy running. That's the problem. I just don't really enjoy running. Like I enjoy cycling. I enjoy I enjoy many sports, but running I just find a little bit on the boring side. That's why I need to have something that I'm training for. I need to have a focus. Otherwise,
That's why you need obstacle course racing. So they put.
I've done a couple of those. They're fun.
Now we're talking in my language.
Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, a couple of Tough Mudders. They are good fun.
Yeah.
The trouble is that when you're a big guy, sorry.
At least it breaks the run up.
Yeah. The trouble is when you're a tall guy though, when you do a Tough Mudder, you're the guy that has to lift everyone over everything.
Yeah.
So that's not much fun, but yeah, they're good fun though. I do any number of them. They are fun.
Well, they were. I don't know about last year, but I know when I was doing them, and I think I've done over 100 of them. So I know
over 100.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
I know my obstacle course racing.
Wow, that's amazing.
But it just like you said, it gave me. It's probably 2 years before I left the city, I started doing them, but I'd got not bored of football, but I'd broken my ankle. So I stopped playing football for a while and, I was going to the gym, but I suddenly needed something else, like you said, to train for.
Yeah.
And as you know, with those, you need to run, but be able to, deal with freezing conditions, be able to use your own upper body strength and crawl and drag and lift and pull and throw and etc. And I wondered with yourself, I know I did one where we ran to the top of Mount Snowdon and back down again, as you do. But I remember halfway up, I was like, I want to give up.
Yeah.
I didn't, but I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing?
Yeah.
I've chosen to be here and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it does give you something to train for.
It's, I think, we've all been in those moments, haven't we? Whether it's a marathon, whether it's whatever, running up Snowdon or whatever we're doing. I can remember thinking that when Rachel was ill, I was like, I just really would love to just not do this anymore and just give up.
Yeah.
Just because it was so very, very, very hard. But somehow you don't, do you? You just
find a way.
And it's not. I read. A lot of sort of motivational speakers and talk, I think is. I read something from Ant Middleton the other day, and somebody was saying to him, asking like his tips for people that were finding it hard to kind of get out the door and go running and do exercise, and his genius tip was just put your shoes on and do it. I was like, that's not. If it was as easy as that, then we'd all be doing it, wouldn't we? It's just not.
Yeah.
I just think there's a bit more to it than that. But it, does, it is amazing just to have a focus, and I've always needed that. I think, that kind of focus. I'd like to do some more stuff. I'd like to do an extraordinarily long bike ride.
Right. Yep.
And I'd like to do a stupidly long paddleboard as well. I just haven't really got around to arranging it yet.
The great thing about those is you have to have a mixture of fitness, don't you? I mean, I always say with running, you're not really using your upper body strength as such. You can run and run and run and run, but when you're doing something like paddleboarding, it gives you another reason to mix your training up.
Yeah.
Which with the Whole Man Academy, one of the big things is talking about not just your health, but about your fitness, which some people confuse the two. It's about finding something that you enjoy. Because as you said, with some people running, they're like, I don't like running. I don't want to do it.
Especially as you get older as well. And you get, when you're in your 20s, you just got so much time to kill.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're in, when you're 30s or 40s, you have kids, you got a family, other commitments. And I think, you have less and less and less time to do that kind of stuff. And it needs to be something that you enjoy.
Yeah,
it has to be. For me anyway, it has to be something I enjoy. I love paddleboarding. I've just found a river down 10 miles away that I was at. You can just when this is all over, I'll be. You can paddleboard 10, 20 miles down it, and you won't see anybody.
I'd love to do that.
It's beautiful. But it has to be something you enjoy. For me anyway, it's so important.
No, it's talking of things you enjoy. One of the things you and I commented on, which is how we got connected via the medium of Robin Switherbank and Instagram, was about barbecues. And I'm a total virgin when it comes to barbecues. I don't want to cook it, but I want to eat it.
Right. Okay.
So I'm always interested. And some of your pictures.
I enjoy doing both. Having a lot of time on my hands. Particularly over the last 10 weeks, but really over the last 18 months, not really working full time. I've had a lot of opportunity to experiment, and I enjoy cooking a lot. Always have done. Really enjoy cooking. I enjoy doing things that maybe are a bit. I enjoy curing stuff. I enjoy like smoking things. I've got a water bath. I had some ribs in there for 48 hours the other day. I've got a multiple barbecue situation outside with all, and I haven't got Rachel here to tell me that I'm wrong, but they all in my head fulfill different purposes.
Yeah. As long as it's clear in your head, that's all you need.
That is all I need. So, but I've started seeing someone else now. And so I'm waiting for her to tell me that I shouldn't have multiple barbecues. But currently we're okay with multiple barbecues. But no, I love barbecuing. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. And I'd barbecue everything if I could. I've barbecued full roast dinners, done every single element of roast dinner on the barbecues. It's brilliant fun.
I see you on Christmas Day out there barbecuing the turkey.
Well, we did. I worked in Brazil for 7 months teaching windsurfing, and I was there over Christmas, and we didn't have turkey. We had chickens, so we barbecued chickens for Christmas dinner. That was good fun.
As long as you're enjoying it. I did have a friend who, when I first met him, I thought he was joking when he said they barbecued their turkey on Christmas Day. But I realised he's an expert. He's got a souped up barbecue, as it were. So it's I was still had that vision of being out with the firelighters, wafting something around. So was it Tender Cow, which is the one on Instagram that you
Yeah. So Tender Cow is there's a market down the road called Altria Market, which it's like an old indoor market that over the last I don't know 3 or 4 years has been turned into a amazing like little hub for small businesses. So there's like little coffee shops, and there's little butchers and like little pizza places, and like a little bar, and it's absolutely buzzing on the weekend, and it's taken quite a hit, as you can imagine, from from lockdown, not just the market itself, but the actual businesses that work in the market, and one of them is a Tender Cow. I don't really know the guys who run it. I just know the food is amazing. So they do
great.
Deliveries. It's incredible. It's incredible. and they lay it all out for you. They give you, all the instructions for how the burger should be layered, and they give you like all the pickles, like caramelized onions. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah,
we had. I'll tell you what. I think it was when I saw one of your Instagram stories, and I think it was one of the burgers that you had. And I know we had on one of our previous podcasts and our Zoom live we did a guy called David Swan, who's a chef who worked with Heston Blumenthal and Gordon Ramsay, and he did a 20-minute. Well, it was supposed to be a 20-minute tutorial on cooking the perfect steak, but because we kept asking him questions, the poor guy was on there for an hour and 20 minutes. But the more pictures I see of stuff like that, I really appreciate good quality meat. And again, even if you have good quality, if you've got to cook it correctly as well.
It's so important. I've been using the water bath a bit for. If you've got this is getting quite geeky now.
You can go on.
I had these big, thick bits of rump steak. A rump steak normally, if you do it, it can get a bit tough. But in the water bath, 45 minutes at 50-something degrees, it cooks it all the way through, and then you just lob it in a pan, in a really hot pan, sear the outside. Oh, it was just heavenly. Absolutely amazing.
It's making my mouth beautiful. Water. I've had dinner, but
it's gorgeous. And
So what barbecue do you, if you're only allowed to use one barbecue? I know this isn't the main point of our podcast, but seeing as we're here, we're going to talk about this important topic.
It's important.
What kind of barbecue, if you're saying you can only use one, would you be using?
Well, the trouble is with it just being me and Freddie, if I want to just chuck a few burgers on the barbecue for of me and him, getting the charcoal going takes a long time.
Yeah.
So you want to just use the gas just to quickly do the. But if you're doing like a brisket for 12 hours, you can't really do it unless it's over coals.
Right.
So I would argue both have their their essential use, and therefore both will be staying.
Rightly so.
And who knows? I might add to the collection. There's other barbecues that I've got my eye on.
Well,
a pizza oven. I fancy a pizza oven.
Oh, how much at the moment? We've not got anywhere really around here that does decent pizzas, to be honest. And there's someone that does a little van of pizzas. They drive around and do it with proper pizza oven, and we're close to getting involved in that. It makes me laugh because we always say with the Whole Man Academy, we're trying to give guys a toolkit for life. And the important part we'll add to that is you need 2 barbecues at least, minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolute minimum, if not 3 or 4.
3 or 4. I just imagine most guys saying to their partners, I've ordered a barbecue. And say, we've got one. Go, no, but listen, I listened to Anthony and Steve.
The one I want is I don't know if you've heard of it. I call it a big green egg.
Right. No.
It's a big ceramic one. I've got a cheaper version, but the temperature control mechanisms are not as clever. Like the big green egg is just incredible, but it costs about 1,800 quid. It's just ridiculous. Well, about 1,500. If you want to get it on a stand, like a nice like wooden table thing, it's about 1,800. And
wow.
I'm just I would
see me pitching that to Emma. So I'm gonna go in feet first with this barbecue lark. And
I mean, if you're gonna go in feet first, that is the one to go in feet first with. That is the one. That's
we've got Christmas coming up. and things we didn't touch on it, but are you any good at football?
Yeah, well, I say yeah. I mean, I played football all my life, really. Never more than kind of, got to like sort of, Saturday afternoon, regional, played for my town on a Saturday afternoon kind of thing. I guess that's kind of one up from Sunday League.
Yeah.
But never any further than that.
What position did you play?
I started off up front when I was a kid, and over the years just moved further and further and further back.
Yeah.
So I'm just about hanging on in a sort of deep field role at the moment.
Yeah.
I played for a veterans team in Knutsford, and but I've done my hamstring and my knee over the last sort of 6 months, and that's coming to an end, I think, realistically. Yeah. Rachael used to you know, Rachel used to. I used to kind of argue that I needed football. You know, I love it as like an escape, like a, you know, I could leave Rachel and Freddie at home, you know, leave the chaos, and I go and play football for 2 or 3 hours. You know, however long it took. Always took a bit longer than maybe it should have done. But yeah, Rachel, as you get older, you get more and more and more injuries, and yeah, she wasn't over the moon with me playing. You know, what if you come back and you've broken your leg and you can't do this? And, yeah.
Yes, it sounds very familiar.
Yeah.
I managed to break my ankle playing football when I worked in the city, so I would have to go on crutches, and this was in kind of October time, so the weather was bad and there was leaves on the ground, up to the station on crutches, and it's pouring, so you can't hold an umbrella and do the crutches.
No.
And then I tried to get on the train, but if you've only got one leg, do you put the crutches on first or do you put the foot on? So I put the crutches on and they slid out in front of me, and I was so I'd sit at my desk with my leg up, you know, especially up with two phones trying to style it out. So it was I got all the same there. Like, when are you going to stop all this stuff?
I mean, you just get more and more injuries, don't you, the older you get? But the older you get, the more you appreciate it, though, I think, as well. Yeah, I think when I was younger, you take it for granted. You play football on a Sunday or a Saturday. Where even I had 2 games on a Saturday at one point. You know, playing for 2 Saturday teams, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and you just couldn't play enough. And
you recover.
Yeah, I had 2 Saturday teams, 1 Sunday morning team. You know, couldn't play enough football, and you know. But now, you know, I know that I've only got possibly not even any more time playing 11-a-side football. So, you know, so I'm really grateful for it. But it's, you know, you definitely feel it the next day.
I will admit, and I'll happily say this publicly, but I'm still waiting for my call up from Jurgen. But you know, now I'm close to 42.
He's a wonderful man. You know, we got to go after Rachel died. Somebody from the club got wind of the fact that I was a Liverpool supporter, and they invited us to Melwood to go and meet the team and meet the squad. And it was just absolutely amazing. It was only a couple of months after she died, but it was just absolutely brilliant.
It's a special day.
Oh, it was just amazing. Like being you know, inside Melwood and just getting big hugs off Jurgen, and only sort of negative was that we were going at 5 o'clock. Which, as you know, with small children, that's a difficult time, because that's around about your feeding time. Freddie was only 3, I think, at the time, so he slept all the way there, like 45 minutes to Melwood, and he woke up in a really, really, really bad mood, and he hadn't had any food. He was tired. It was a really cold night, so I'm trying to carry him in, you know, trying to. You know, let him enjoy, you know, let him boot a little football around. You know, Bobby Firmino's trying to tickle him, and he's batting his hand off and saying, "Get off, get off." Daniel Sturridge is trying to play with him, and he's just pushing him away.
Kids have no respect for fame, and
no. You know, but you know, being Liverpool support, it's funny. I've always really, really, really loved football, but after Rachel died, I just found myself not really that bothered. I just wasn't, you know, I was still kind of looking for results and stuff, but it didn't really bother me what happened.
Yeah. And
then do you remember that glorious night when we beat Barcelona 4-0?
Possibly the greatest comeback, but
and I was watching, well, not possibly. Like, I was watching it at home by myself, and when was that? That was about a year ago, probably, wasn't it? Like April, I imagine. And I just remember crying, like, just when the 4th goal went in, just crying. And it was such a glorious moment that, like, all of a sudden I just loved football again.
Yeah.
And it was I tried to explain this to the girls on the podcast, and they were just looking at me with their mouth open. But it had been such a big part of my life, and then all of a sudden wasn't. And it was so wonderful to kind of, feel that way again about football. It was just that was amazing.
Did you? Because I always say, sport, any sport, but with football that we're talking about, can crosses the divide of people and of countries and wealth and everything that goes with it. But sometimes it's hard to explain to some people how much it can mean to you. I wondered then, when you watched the final against Spurs, I was in an interesting situation because, me being a Liverpool supporter, I was at Emma's parents' house and they live in Enfield, so they're lifelong Spurs fans, season ticket holders,
right.
And they invited their friends around who are obviously all Spurs fans as well. So I was the only Liverpool supporter in the room, and it was a bit of an anticlimax, the final. I remember it was great, but it kind of, I don't know, it wasn't it's so hard to replicate anything like the comeback.
We watched it in Salcombe in Devon. Actually, it was a really special place for Rachel and I. We go there every year. She just absolutely loved it. It was a place that she wanted to go before she died. So we were there like a month before she died, and it was our kind of special place. And after she died, I booked a big house, and we got Rachel's mum, Rachel's brother, his partner, all my family, my sister, all of her kids, my parents. There were like, I don't know what, 11 or 12 of us, and we all went to a big house in Salcombe.
Right.
And I'd booked it, not realizing what the date of the final was, and then because that was all booked, I couldn't even think about going to Madrid. But it was nice to watch it in a place that was so important, and we're in this pub, and there were a lot of Tottenham fans who all went very quiet after about 30 seconds or whatever it was.
It's so funny how the contrasting emotions like that for when you win you're elated, and when you lose it's despair. I wondered where you were on the night when Liverpool won the Champions League, back in the Istanbul final
in 2005.
Yeah.
I was actually at a friend of mine's house in East Wittering in down on the south coast, and at Chichester, and he's not in any way into football whatsoever, and I can't for the life of me think why I watched it there. I have no idea, because there was me and these other two guys, and they're just not into football, and I have no idea why I watched it, but I can remember after we won, his house is right by the beach, and we literally ran out the back door of his house straight into the water. It was just glorious. What a moment.
I always love the stories of that is one of those where were you moments. I mean, not necessarily for everybody in the country, but for a lot of football fans, because I remember watching Man United come back against Bayern Munich and celebrating, because it was incredible. I nearly had a nasty business there, because I was on a business trip out in Budapest, and I went to the pub that evening. And when Liverpool were 3-0 down, I said to a big group of business people, and I said, I'm going to go, because I was flying off to Italy the next morning. And I literally went up to go to Lou and got back. And the guy said, I didn't realize you were going. I've got you another pint. And I was like, I said, do you know what? I'll just finish my pint and then I'll go. And it was just as I was finishing my pint that the first goal went in. And, can you imagine though, waking up next morning for your flight and, getting to the airport and then seeing the headlines and missing it?
Mate, you would have been. Well, I've had a bit of history of that. I left early. I was at Anfield for the derby last year when Divock Origi scored in the 95th minute, and I'd left at 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I was just outside the ground when I heard the roar. Oh, crushing.
And it's funny, is it? Because I'm sure you've done the same, where you hold on, it's like just in case, then nothing happens, then you get caught up in all the people, and it's that one time. I'll admit, when the West Ham FA Cup final, I think it was 3-2 down, wasn't it? Just with
I was in Budapest watching that game, actually.
Right. And I left because I couldn't face watching, Liverpool hand the FA Cup over. So I left and I drove down to play football. And I arrived, and the guy, I got out and said, wasn't that an amazing game? Oh, no, that's it. He said, weren't the penalties great? I said, what? So we're
Oh man,
we're
that's
learning,
extraordinary.
but
That's absolutely amazing.
well, hopefully at some point when life returns to normal, we'll get
Yeah,
to meet up somehow to either watch a
I hope
game
so.
or
I hope so.
paddleboarding or something.
I hope, or do a Tough Mudder.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I'll get back into that. Well, I ended up doing I represented Team UK in the World Championships in America,
Oh wow.
and that was great. But it was around. I kind of got that was after 4 years of doing it, and it was
Yeah,
great. But I just got to a stage where I was like, I got bored of it. It's funny, just
yeah.
after that. So
I mean, once you get bored of that, I don't know what you do. Was it
yeah.
ultra marathons next, or?
Uh, I'm not sure what I really did after that. We kind of just moved up. We moved out to the Cotswolds, and then kind of, life took a strange turn. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? How you can be besotted with something, and then like that, it switches
Yeah,
off. But
yeah,
now I would have the hunger to go and do it again. So perhaps we'll pick one that's not too far.
yeah. I mean, yeah. You come down to my level. You come
Oh,
down to me.
it's all about the right.
We'll get Robin doing it as well.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd pay to see Robin
I
doing
mean,
it
he
as
could
well.
just literally lift us over the obstacles.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point with the monkey bars with him, is there? To be honest, but that would be a sight to behold. Well, look, I'll let you go. One thing I was going to ask you at the end was about if there was one piece of advice you could give a guy to do life better, what would it be?
I think what I said to you earlier on, focus on the stuff you can affect. You focus on the things that you can actually have an impact on, and try and work out, if you can, a way of being okay with the rest of it.
Yeah.
The stuff that you can't affect, what can you do? Let it go. Just work on doing the best that you can in the stuff that you can affect. I think is the thing that has helped me the most, I would say, over the last 18 months.
No, it's great, and we're always trying to extract from people that we speak to these little golden nuggets. And I always think the important thing is a lot of them come around to if you hear a lot of the same thing, that should tell guys that that's because it's important and it works. Which I think we're big into working and helping people with their mindset. And yeah, as you said, it's understanding those things that day to day and not just long term, but day to day can really help you.
Yeah.
Well, also just to acknowledge you for coming on the podcast and spending what we've done an hour and a half, which is a good effort. And also, for you as a dad, I think it's so important that you're, doing your best in what has been a challenging time, and reminds all the guys listening that we're going to get thrown stuff in life. Often you don't get to choose what it is, but
yeah, that's it. I mean, look, the people said, after Rachel died, it's so, it's brave doing this, or it's brave doing that. What option do you have? When you're chucked into that situation, through no fault of your own, what option do you have?
Yeah.
You only have two really. You curl up in a ball and you put your fingers in your ears and you close your eyes and you try and forget it's all happening, or you roll your sleeves up and have a go and try and kind of salvage whatever you can out of the wreckage, and try and get something positive out of it. And that's what I've tried to do. I
think it's a great message, and we'll make sure we're touching on the points of this when we're posting on social media, because often people need to hear this from people that have gone through it, to understand that there are people out there that understand how challenging it can be.
I hope it. I know when Rachel died, I looked for people a bit ahead of me in a similar journey. The guy called Simon Thomas, who's a good friend of mine, whose wife Gemma died. He's a Blue Peter presenter. His wife Gemma died of acute myeloid leukemia just under a year before Rachel. And having someone like him who I could look at and say, right, he's a year or so ahead of me, but he looks like he's sort of getting it together. Really helped, and I would love it. If I could be that person for someone else, that they're going through like a really tough time, and they look at, I haven't got all the answers by any stretch. I don't ever pretend to, but I'm doing okay. And if anybody's listening and they're right in the middle of it, but having a really tough time, promise you, it does get easier. It does get better.
No, it's so important, I think, that people hear that, because I always say, you know, your mood or sometimes what you're going through can be a bit like the weather. And when you're in the eye of the storm, it's hard to remember that there can be sunny days again.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. And I think, I always, like I said, I always found it helpful to look at people in my situation a little bit further ahead who, had made it out in one piece, and we're getting it together, and it does get easier.
It's what people need to hear, I think, and also for guys who are going to face these issues, as opposed to just have dealt with it. I think it's
no, it's so true. I've had quite a lot of messages actually from guys either in my position or whose wives are ill, maybe my position in the future, and I think guys they sort of do want to talk. They don't always have an outlet. That's why something like the Whole Man Academy is, such a great thing to give men an opportunity and a way of expressing it, a way of talking about things. And like I said, I do get messages from people. They just don't know where to turn. They don't know who to talk to about these things. They can't talk to their mates because their mates don't understand. And I think we just all need to look. We're none of us are getting out of here alive, are we? So we may as well, accept that, start talking about it, and I think only by talking about it can we start to, really kind of make the best of whatever time we've got.
Yeah, no, that's why, as you said at the start, at the top of the show, touching on some sometimes difficult topics but important ones, can help guys to, I don't know, just deal with what we're going through a little bit better. Which
hope so.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
And what's your plan now? Straight to bed?
A glass of wine.
I think the same. Are you up early tomorrow?
I hope not.
Yeah.
You never quite know, do you?
No, I'll be in the gym at 6, so I'll.
Oh, mate, no chance. Obviously, that's the thing. I can't do that anyway. Well, I've really missed actually the last 7 weeks being able to go cycling and being able to just get out, and it just been me and Freddie. I haven't been able to do that, so I'm yearning for that.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed, not too long now.
Well, on that bombshell, we've covered all the important topics. Not least Liverpool and barbecuing as well.
Yeah.
So Steve, thanks very much, and
no problem.
And hopefully we will speak to you very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me along.
All right, thanks, Steve.